Hi, welcome to this lecture. Now we want to focus on how can we modify the appearance of all the 9 data components. Okay, so in this case, we're simply just focusing on the themes. In order to demonstrate the themes, we are going to continue with examining the usual relationship. Now we are using this data set for demonstration purposes. So if we come in here, what I'm going to do, I want to use the theme function. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to assign this into this variable and let's run this. Now, if we come in here and we want to use this function, theme function, okay? So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to try how can we modify the appearance on the x-axis as well as the y-axis. Now, what we're going to do, we're first going to use this argument which is axis.title.x. What this argument does is that it will go here into this scatterplot and it will modify the appearance. So our main focus is now on the appearance of the x-axis. Okay, so we can also go ahead and also modify the color as well as the size by also using another function, which is element underscore. That function is element underscore text. Okay, so this function over here is the function that we are going to use in order to try and modify the color in the x-axis as well as the size of the title. Now let's come in here and say for the color we want red. So what's going to happen is that it will come here in the x-axis and change the color to be red. We can also modify the size. So if we also come in here and say the size, say for example we're going to say 10. So let's run this. So now what you observe in the x-axis, this label has changed the color as well as the size. We can also go ahead and do the same. Say for example we wanted to modify the y-axis. So if we come in here and say we want to change the color as well as the size, and to run this, you'll notice that we have changed the color as well as the size. So remember that what you want to do here, you want to modify the appearance, okay? And that appearance is that of a theme element, in this case, which is what? Text. So we have to use this function, okay? So we have to use element text because we are modifying the appearance of a theme element, in this case which is text. So we have seen how can we modify the x-axis as well as the y-axis. We can also go ahead and modify the ticks. So what do I mean by that? So if we come in here and say theme and say axis dot ticks. So we want axis.ticks. This. Remember, we're also modifying, right? So we have to use this function, which is element line, okay? Because the ticks are of type line, okay? So we have to use that function. Say, for example, we want to change the color of the ticks. Let's say we want to change the color of the ticks to be blue. Following, we want to modify the size. So let's pass in 1.2. We also want to specify what? The type of the line. Say for example, we use line type 2, the dashed lines. So if we try to run this, so you notice that we have managed to modify the ticks here in this scatter plot. We can also go ahead and modify the length of these ticks. So how can you do that? So in order to do that, to come in here and say axis.ticks.length. Okay, this will allow us to modify the length of these ticks. So if we come in here and say this becomes 1, so if we try to run this, so notice that we are getting an error. That is because we have to come in here and specify the units. Okay, so we have to come here and specify the unit. Say for example 1 and the unit is centimeter. Okay, so if you run this, you notice we now have this scatter plot, and we have managed to modify the length of this axis tip. Remember that here we use the unit function to specify that we are taking 1 centimeter to be equal to 1 unit along the x axis as well as the y axis. So that is what we have done here. Remember, we are simply just getting an error if we specify 1. That is because we want to use the unit function in order to specify that 1 centimeter equals to 1 unit along both these axes. So that is how we were able to control the length of the ticks. There's also no need to even add the length of these ticks if there is no need to do so, because it can get quite confusing. Now, let us add another argument to try and modify the appearance of the axis lines. Okay, so in order to do that, I'm going to clear the console. I'm going to come in here and say theme, okay, and say axis.line. So what I want to do is I'm going to use this function element line. So what I want to do is I want to modify the line. Let's say I want this line to be blue. Okay, so if I run this, so you can see we have modified the color of the line. We can also modify what? The type. So let's say we simply just want the type 1. So if you run this and say type 2, okay, so you can also use maybe type 3. We can also modify the size of this line, because you can see here we simply just want to make this a little bit bigger. So in order to do that, let's say we use 1.8. So if you run this, so you can see we have managed to modify these lines. So that is how you can modify this axis, the line argument, using this function element line in order to control things such as your color, the type of a line, as well as the size.